Welcome to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim the Nerd, and seated next to me in a lavish kimono outfit with awesome brand new glasses, we have Professor Aubrey here. And this week, we are going to be diving into our pop culture fandom, not to talk about stuff we like. We're going to go a little out of the ordinary and talk about stuff we don't like. We are going to be discussing our least favorite TV shows, what we consider to be the worst TV shows ever made.
Yes, but our universe is smaller than that because we haven't seen everything ever made. So it's anything I've seen that I hated.
Yeah, and as always, I mean, I'll put the disclaimer up front too, because I'm sure I got one choice that people will be like, really? This is just our opinion. If you disagree with us, we are not talking bad about you or anything like that. We just want to express our hatred for some of the worst content ever put on a television screen, because when you have great sitcoms that can reverberate through the ages, like the Dick Van Dyke Show, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Three's Company, Cheers, Frasier, stuff like that, when you have that great content and then you pair it with some of the other just horrible, rotten stuff, it's just like, what, this needs to be commented on,
Yeah, well, let's comment upon it then.
Well, all right. How about you dive into your first choice?
Okay. So maybe I preface this by saying that we're both children of the television.
Yes, it's a cult that was founded in the 70s. Everybody marries each other. And anyway.
I'm going to start with it's hard to pick, but I'm going to start with the one that I liked least when I was youngest, which is Tammy's House Party. I used to watch all the time with my sister because it came on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was Tammy Faye Baker's daytime talk show.
Now, was this when she was still part of the PTO? Was this a
Yes,
religious? Okay.
yes, it was a PTL. Tammy's House Party was the name of it. And it was her being all domestic. Like she'd make ice cream pies. Like I vividly remember her making an ice cream pie by just taking ice cream, putting it in a pie shell, and then putting whipped cream on top.
I need a pie.
Anyhow, it was, and she sang, so it was a talk show interspersed with Tammy Faye Baker singing.
Yes.
So that's what the rest of the world had to stand up to for the time after I was about 16.
Yeah, she's definitely an interesting figure. I can say from my own experience, like the older I get and the more I know about her story, the more the unnecessary hatred I had at that younger age has kind of dissipated and gone away. What do I mean by the hatred? Her husband in the 80s was Jim Baker, and he smuggled a lot of money from people, broke some laws, and also Jessica Hahn was having an affair on Tammy Faye. And, based on the record that's out there, she did not really deserve the scorn and ridicule that came her way. It's like, it seems like hindsight being 2020, she ended up getting the brunt of the force of negative public opinion because of her husband's actions.
Mm-hmm.
And that really wasn't fair, especially when, yeah, I'm sure that show was cheesy. In the 90s, she did have a regular daytime talk show with Jim J. Bullock as her co-host. I don't know if you remember him, but
Oh
he's
yeah.
yeah, he used to be on the New Hollywood Squares and everything like
Yeah.
that. But like, she's cheesy. I get it. But again, like the more I've ended up learning about her and her story, the more real she is, and it just makes you feel bad, for throwing all the brunt of the negative social impact against her when, again, she didn't really do anything bad in the 80s. I mean, yeah, she lived a rich life, but she was not the one breaking the laws. Her husband at the time was.
Well, it's just patriarchy. and misogyny
I,
that
I
that happens.
I know, but at least there again, at least people are now getting a full story too, because I think one thing she should be commended for in the 80s as a conservative televangelist, she actually had people gay people with AIDS on the show to talk about their struggle. She wasn't one to say these people are going to hell. She gave a voice to them, to an audience that would not have seen that otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And, that should be commended.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what am I going to go back and watch Tammy's beach party or whatever the hell that was? No, I'm not. But
I would, in a very nostalgic way. I would do that with my sister, probably not anybody else in the world.
yeah, you'll have to buy like the onesie pajamas, get some popcorn, and pretend it's like Saturday morning or something like that.
No, it was an after school thing.
Or after school thing. Okay. While I was watching You Can't Do That on television and wrestling, you were watching Tammy Faye.
That's right, exactly.
All right. Anyway, any other thoughts on Tammy Faye?
No.
All right. How
Let's
about
hear about your first one.
Well, my first one, I've talked about this on the show before. I think the creators of the show should be arrested, brought to The Hague for war crimes against humanity.
Well,
It's The Big Bang Theory. It
uh,
is the absolute worst sitcom that has ever been created. I can be a stickler with comedy. Like recently, you started rewatching Silicon Valley from Mike Judge, and you've been laughing your ass off. And I've got some laughs, but overall, it wasn't totally working for me, and that's fine. But The Big Bang Theory, anytime I've been forced to watch an episode of that show, I have not laughed once. Not even a single solitary giggle at something, because it seems like they're trying to make all these nerdy jokes, and all these nerdy jokes were written by people who have no idea what being a nerd is.
hmm
It just, everything about that show is fake. And I'm not even going to knock the actors on that show, like Jim Parsons, I believe his name is, the guy who plays Sheldon. I haven't seen him in much, but he was pretty funny in that Muppets movie from 2011. He was in the Am I a Man or Am I a Muppet song.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when the Muppet was Am I a Man? And Jim Parsons was the real life version of that Muppet in that song.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So it's not like I have a dislike for them. It's not like a Will Ferrell type of deal where it's just like, I hate you for no real reason. But just what an awful, awful show.
Yeah, I can tell that you feel very strongly about that.
It is insulting on so many levels. There's like all the characters are just two-dimensional at best. The premise they do for each episode is just it's poorly written. I don't get why it was popular by a bunch of people. If this means that I'm just not quote unquote with it, I don't want to be with it.
Hmm.
It's like, to me, the death of the sitcom happened when The Big Bang Theory debuted.
Wow.
Like, it is just that awful.
I don't think I've ever seen a whole episode of it.
If you like it and you watch it and you like it, I mean, it is on Max after all. I mean, that's fine, but it's just, to me, it's just cliche. It's cliche. It's just sitcom trope after sitcom trope. I know I tried to watch Everybody Loves Raymond with you before, and that was not your thing. And what I've always said about Everybody Loves Raymond is that, yeah, they weren't trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. They just, I felt they did pretty good with the writing on that show, and the acting, of course. When you got Peter Boyle involved, it's going to be good somewhat, but it just, sitcoms have just devolved so much that I just can't anymore. I can't. They're just not for me.
Just sitcoms in general.
Yeah. I can go back and watch some of the stuff I grew up on, and, that is, I mean, we've kind of talked about that before, but like, the things that you kind of go back to are the things that first fell in love with around like, junior high school. It's like that particular age is where everything gets seared in your head as to what you like and what you don't like. And I guess I just expect something a lot different than that uncreative mess.
Yeah.
I'm glad that show is done. I'm glad they're not making any more. If people out there want to like it, great. Um, you are talking to the guy who saw Freddy Got Fingered in theaters twice, considered one of the worst movies ever made. So, I'm not gonna be the person that's gonna, lecture anybody about liking only quality stuff, because there's stuff that I like that I know is goofy as hell, but just is just awful, awful.
Okay. I get it.
All right,
You don't like it.
yeah, they should be brought to the Hague. Damn it.
Right.
All right, what is your next choice?
My next choice is Cop Rock. Da-na-na-na-na. So Cop Rock was a very short-lived, like it might have been 3 episodes or something. It was a musical that was a cop show.
Yeah, I believe it was created by Stephen Bochco, the guy behind like LA Law and shows like that.
Oh,
And
right.
it was an experiment.
Yeah, boy, what an experiment. The singing is not good.
Yeah,
Nothing about it is good.
like the song and dance numbers about, like we're doing the paperwork, we're going to get the perps, la la. Just I, I could see maybe a movie or something like that, something short term, not what was intended to be a continuous series, to where you can maybe have a little fun with that idea, because I believe it or not, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, but for when you have a musical, you have to have good music.
Yeah,
You just do. And if the music's not memorable in any way, shape, or form, or just not good, then it's going to sink you.
absolutely.
Any lasting memories of Cop Rock?
No, not at all. Not at all. Just a vague, vague memory. And just being like, what the F? What the F is that? And this, I think was about the same time that some really great sitcoms were coming out, like Freaks and Geeks.
That was a little later in the 90s. At the beginning of the 90s, you had Seinfeld debut.
Okay.
You were a couple years away from Friends. So, of course, Frasier. Yeah, I mean, you may not like it, but it is considered, a classic of American sitcoms and all that.
Sure.
So it was around that era.
Yeah. But it just made me think of Freaks and Geeks and how much I love that sitcom.
All right. Yeah, that will not be on the list.
No, that will not. Are
But
we ready for my next one? No, it's your turn.
yeah, it would be my next one.
Okay,
That's
yes, go ahead.
right.
Go ahead, go ahead.
All right. In the 80s, Ted Turner helped bring his TV channel, WTBS, onto cable systems everywhere. It became Superstation TBS.
Yes, Superstation.
And they made their name because of a few things: Atlanta Braves baseball, the Andy Griffith Show, reruns of the Andy Griffith Show, reruns of Leave It to Beaver, and professional wrestling. Leave It to Beaver ended up becoming so popular that Ted Turner had the bright idea of, let's bring it back. They had the new Leave It to Beaver on TBS. New episodes with everybody that was still alive from that show.
Really?
Yes, and it was a mess. Like, one, even in the 80s, I knew Leave It to Beaver was just awful. I mean, the original show. I mean, if people talked about it, they were about it to goof on it. Gee, Wally, that type of deal. And like Barbara Billingsley, I believe her name was, Ma Cleaver. Like the only reason I had any sort of good memories from her was her role in Airplane,
Oh,
where she interpreted jive talk.
oh,
you know. So at least it was that, but just like I don't. I didn't want to see a childhood beaver. I didn't want to see an adult beaver. I didn't want to see his brother Wally, having an episode where they're worrying about their mortgage. I didn't want to see Eddie Haskell as a pathetic guy in his 40s. It was just awful. And my mother, for some reason, just loved to have that on. It's just like, thanks, Mom. Thanks.
interesting.
You're
She
supposed
liked it.
Well, I mean, for her, a lot of it was nostalgia too. I mean, with cable in its infancy at that point, one big draw for people of her age was the fact that you had things like, Andy Griffith reruns on TBS or Nick at Night becoming a thing to where shows that were on the air when she was a kid and were now there for her to watch again.
Right.
So it had a pull for her, like I'm sure, something from the 90s would have a pull for me that would not have a pull for my kids.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of the beast. But again, the new Leave It to Beaver was just awful. Just again, these people should be ashamed of themselves for wanting to be involved, and for actually putting that awfulness on the air. Like, TBS is so much better now. But then again, I shouldn't say that because TBS does carry the Big Bang Theory
Oh, uh-huh.
and plays that a lot. So what the hell do they know?
Yeah, they don't know anything, do they?
The jerks. Any memories about Leave It to Beaver, or do you remember the new Leave It to Beaver?
I don't remember the new one. I do remember the old one and watching it on Nick and Night, basically.
It was the birth of the sitcom in the 50s, and things are meant to evolve. I just don't see how that type of quote unquote humor ever really worked. you know? I just don't get why.
It's almost like what we believe we think is funny.
Yeah, like if we go back and like listen, watch like old Saturday Night Live episodes from the 80s, at the time when we watched them as they aired, they were super edgy, but now they're tame by modern comedy standard.
Mm-hmm.
And which is how it should be. I mean, things again evolved, but man, I'm glad I never have to watch that show again. But there is one wrestling tie-in as well, because at the first Clash of the Champions, the main event was Sting challenging Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight Championship, and it was going to go to a 45 minutes. It was billed for 45 minutes. If it went the time limit, then judges would be, giving their decision on who they thought won. And Ken Osmond, who played Eddie Haskell in promoting the new Leave It to Beaver show, was one of the judges.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, the only good thing about Ken Osmond being on the first Clash of the Champions was that he did have a little segment with bad guy manager Jim Cornette.
Oh, I love Jim Cornette.
Yeah, he was able to get some funny bits, and I think he got Ken laughing and joking and more into it than he was just on his own. But yeah, that was a new Leave It to Beaver. How about your next choice?
My next choice is going to be The Real World. The Real World. What I consider the first reality show. I don't know if you consider it the first reality show.
It's technically not. There was a documentary series that was on PBS in the 70s that followed a family that is generally considered the first reality show. But for reality shows as we know them today, it started with the real world.
It was like the first popular.
Yeah. Yeah. And because of the popularity and because of how little it costs to produce, that's when studio execs were like, cha-ching, and wave after wave after wave of
It's still
reality shows.
happening. It's still happening.
Yes, but it is on a bit of a decline because reality shows have been so popular. They're actually the people that are involved, the talent, are now actually organizing and unionizing. And when you have that union option, then studios are going to start looking elsewhere for content as well. Which doesn't mean reality shows will stop being made, of course, but just a lot fewer of them will be made. And we're also just in a weird time in entertainment as well, because TV as we knew it growing up is dead. It's dead. I mean, you'll still have signals, you still have a TV antenna to where you can watch stuff, but how we consume our media is just radically different, and it's not going back to the days of buying the TV guide and having a strict list of channels to be able to watch entertainment on. Like, we can watch virtually anything we want.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about that, the TV guide. there was so little that it could fit in a book. Like there was so little content just in the world that it could fit into a book that all what was happening on television for what, a week?
Yep.
That seems bizarre now, given how many, bytes and of data are wrapped up in entertainment now.
Yeah, I mean, just so many options to consume data, as you call it. I mean, whether it be through a streaming app, through regular TV, if you still purchase physical media, you still have that option as well. It's just so different.
Yeah. But anyway, the real world.
I only got into one season of that show. It was The Real World Hawaii
Mm,
in 99. I just had a lot of time on my hands one summer and ended up watching it. Like the first episode, like a young lady who was a part of the Real World clan in Hawaii got like so drunk they had to take her to the hospital. And it was like, oh man, I gotta watch, because like a young guy in my 20s at that time and, liking a lot of shit. you know? I've never been a huge reality show person myself. There have been a couple that have caught my interest and I've watched, of course. I'm not going to say they're without value, period, but I just don't care for the real world format of, pretty people in pretty places doing things that I financially would have to save up for a couple of years to be able to do. So yeah, like a lot of people like watching those types of shows like that or the Kardashians. I guess I just never understood that mindset of I may live in a trailer, but I want to be like these people that I'm seeing on TV. Just it's not even reality as we would think of it because it is an open secret that a lot of the quote unquote drama that they have on these types of shows is just manufactured.
yeah.
It's just the producers are putting the people under premises to get a particular outcome that they want, for ratings and everything like that. It's kind of like, in a lot of ways, like improvised,
Yeah.
just poorly.
Yeah. I was talking to some people who watch one of those Love is Blind TV show. Do you know that TV show?
Yeah.
This is where people meet someone and agree to marry them without ever seeing them.
Ew.
And then as part of the wedding, after they say I do, then they get
The unveiling.
the unveiling occurs and then they see each other for the first time, already married.
Yeah, that reminds me. I mean, they did have that Who Wants to Marry a Multimillionaire on Fox. Do you remember that?
No.
It was a one-time special that they had that they were hoping would turn into something bigger, but it never did. To where this quote-unquote millionaire chose through a list of women, and the women had to like answer questions and do stuff. And then at the end, when he picked the winner, they got married at the end of that show on live TV.
Whoa.
Ultimately, the woman in question rushed to the quickest legal place to get it annulled,
Mm,
and realized just how ridiculous it was, just after the fact. But she still collected a paycheck, so, I'm not exactly her biggest fan, but that was a thing at one point on Fox.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, the things people do for money or fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they ended up all not famous.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they'll pop up on like some of those like world's dumbest criminals shows. I mean,
Hmm.
they always seem to find people like from like the 90s or something like that. Or it's like, it's Tiffany talking about somebody that shoplifted something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, shall I go on with
Yes.
my
What's
next
your
one?
next one?
All right. This was a show that was popular in the 60s. One of the producers ended up producing The Godfather on that show. His name was Albert Ruddy. But even in the 60s, I really don't know how a sitcom set in a Nazi concentration camp was allowed to be on television.
Yeah.
Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah.
Like, tone deaf in so many ways. And that's not even taking into account the sordid history of the star of the show, Bob Crane.
Oh yeah, what's that?
He was notorious for being quite the pervert. And not we're not talking he just liked to have sex a lot. We're talking like he would like film it and do all kinds of other stuff. He actually was murdered
Whoa.
because of the associates he kept for the type of perversions that got him off. Also on that show, speaking of sex perverts, Richard Dawson. That's where
Uh,
he that's where he got his first big American break.
whoa.
Yeah, because believe it or not, he was born in England.
I do not believe that.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Yeah, don't question me. But again, like The Simpsons have referenced Hogan's heroes throughout, and like Colonel Clank with the Hogan. I mean, I get why people thought it was funny, but I'm sure people had a good time watching like Amos and Andy back in the day too, and having great laughs without thinking this is just wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that, 30 years from now, people are going to be saying that about us.
Well, I mean, if there was I mean, it would be like if there was a TV show that came out now that was a sitcom set, and the star of the show was like Osama bin Laden.
Right.
It just, yeah, like it should not have worked. It did, but it was also the 60s. It was a different era. That doesn't forgive it, but people had different thoughts about entertainment at that particular point in time.
Yeah, and everybody was pretending to like things they didn't like.
Yeah, you didn't have many options, folks. 3 channels. I
And
mean,
everybody had to pretend like they were somebody they weren't. And so they would say they liked the show, even if they didn't like the show. Do you know what I mean? Like there was so much social pressure back then.
yeah, water cooler talk and everything. But yeah, hopefully, along with shows like Amos and Andy, I hope this one just collects dust and withers away. In 100 years from now, it may be a footnote in some book somewhere.
Yeah.
Because it deserves to just fade away and die. What's your
Okay
next?
then.
Yeah, what's your
Okay
next one?
then. Fade away and die. My next one is Alf. This was a television show that had an alien from space
Planet Melmac.
as basically one of the characters in a sitcom, pretty normal family sitcom, and it was bizarre.
You're telling me. My mother loved that show, so we saw it a lot. And it had its moments. I mean, the titular character, Gordon Shumway, better known as Alf, was unique at times. But what I find interesting is there's a backstory to the show. Are you familiar in the 90s with a Ben Stiller film called Permanent Midnight?
No.
It was based off a memoir by a guy by the name of Jerry Stahl, who used to write for Alf.
Uh,
He had a severe heroin addiction, though, and like there's a scene in the book that they do in the movie, but obviously they couldn't use Alf in the movie. But it was the guy was so strung out on heroin, he was locked in the bathroom, thinking that Alf was on the other side of the bathroom door trying to get him.
oh.
And like a lot of his like trauma, his mental health issues ended up like coming out in the script in certain ways as well. Like off the top of my head, I can't think of anything like that, but I'll to be able to tell you in regards to an example or anything like that. But it had an interesting creation, let's put it that way. But it was 80s schmaltz at its most mediocre, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I thought it had its moments, and I think the idea itself, I think that there is something there to where you could make an interesting story, but having it as a sitcom, nah. Let me guess, you absolutely hated it from day one, or were you like sort of a fan at the start, or
No, as soon as I saw Alf, I was like, this is stupid.
I'm not going to be like some dumb kid in Michigan who will watch it every week. I get it. I get it. It did end on a cliffhanger. The show, they were hoping to get like an additional season, but they were not able to do that. And then in '96, they had a TV movie called Project Alf. that co-starred Martin Sheen. This is before he got the West Wing.
Oh, wow.
And I think Martin Sheen would probably be the first to say that, apart from being Charlie Sheen's dad, this is probably his career low point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thankfully, he got the West Wing, right?
Yeah, and the guy, came roaring back.
That's right. Speaking of roaring back, how about I go on with my next choice?
Yes, please.
All right. One of my favorite sitcoms growing up was Three's Company. Simple premise, characters in a lot of ways were two-dimensional, but John Ritter was a comedic actor like I've never seen before. And I don't, I hope to see someone like that again, though. He was, in terms of his acting ability, Jack Tripper felt real, but he also was able to do the pratfalls in a lot of ways, utilize physical humor, similar to like what they did in the 30s and 40s or on I Love Lucy, of course. Lucille Ball was a huge fan of his. In fact, back in the days, kids, before streaming, the only way to be able to see the best parts of a TV show would be if you have the flashback episodes.
Oh,
Three's Company didn't necessarily, they had a flashback episode, but they didn't make it to where everybody was talking like, hey, do you remember when we did this? No, it was just Lucille Ball hosting the show and then, talking about the clips. But anyway, after I believe 7 seasons, the show ended up wrapping up in a somewhat controversial way. It wrapped up by ending Three's Company and starting my next choice, Three's a Crowd,
oh,
because Jack Tripper found a woman he fell in love with and got married to her, and her father ended up buying the bistro that Jack owned, and Jack and his new wife lived upstairs from Jack's bistro,
okay.
and that was the whole premise of the show. But like by removing everybody else that was there from Three's Company, like Mr. Furley, Janet, Terry, Larry, of course, and having a completely new cast, it didn't work. The woman that they hired to play Jack Tripper's wife, they had no chemistry at all.
Mm,
And it came across as milk toast at best. Like, just no charisma, no anything. It was just a bad show. And it's a shame that the Three's Company had to be sullied by having such a bad show come directly after that. And it also wasn't cool too how the producers ended up, they didn't necessarily tell Joyce DeWitt, who played Janet, that they weren't going to go on with another season with her. And so at the end, when she's like crying, saying goodbye to everything, there's like legitimate tears, and she's like, pissed in real life, understandably so. But just Three's a Crowd, like, isn't as offensive as the Big Bang Theory is to me. It's just, what is offensive to me is just how mediocre it was, especially when you had a talent like John Ritter involved.
right.
Like, it should have been so much better. And maybe if they just cast someone else in the wife role that had better chemistry with John Ritter, maybe, we would be talking today about how good that show was.
Right.
But I really think she was the weak link.
Hmm. Well, definitely wasn't John Ritter, right? He was a very gifted actor.
Yeah, and his career was fine after that. Ended up being involved in a number of sitcoms, did a couple of movies, the Problem Child movies.
Yeah.
So yes, and of course, sadly, we know that he did pass away in 2002. It was a heart issue that he was not aware of and ultimately passed away. But his legacy will live on, just not in Three's a Crowd.
Right.
All right. What is your last choice?
My last choice is Dinosaurs.
Ew.
Like, really? That's a thing? I don't know if people remember that show, but it was a show of sort of live action dinosaurs, similar to Alf, only they were dinosaurs. Anthropomorphic dinosaurs. Who it was like a sitcom,
Like The Simpsons, let's be honest. It was a Simpsons ripoff.
yeah. Right. It had the male, the stupid husband, father character, and
The all-wise mother.
the mischief making son.
Or the baby, not the daddy, not the dad, and what a show do like the very last episode of that show is dinosaurs going extinct for what was a half-hour sitcom with Jim Henson Muppets involved. Like one of the most depressing endings to a TV show that you could think of.
Yeah.
Like it just,
They just killed them all off.
yeah, just tonally it just didn't work. And like Henson, he would get behind some unique projects at times, let's put it that way. And yeah, like there's a reason we only people like of our age bring this up. I don't think dinosaurs, I've not come across any like hardcore younger people that were like, oh my god, dinosaurs, love that show.
Right.
It was definitely a product of its time. But was this one again that you hated instantly,
Yes.
or okay?
Yeah. And it's the whole premise of that I'm going to be fooled by these Muppets into thinking this is a real thing.
Yeah, because the Muppets were a whole different beast altogether. I mean, but the thing is, what worked for the Muppets was that you ended up caring for the characters, so that when Kermit would talk to Steve Martin on the show, you felt like it was an actual conversation happening. Whereas in Dinosaurs, it was a sitcom. They were two-dimensional characters. You didn't really get a chance to get to know them. They were just tropes.
Yeah.
And yeah, didn't work. I was glad it went
As
extinct.
opposed to Fraggle Rock, which worked for a decade at least. Do you remember Fraggle Rock?
I would watch it only when HBO would have like the free previews,
Oh, uh-huh.
the free preview weekend.
Right.
Because, yeah, back in the day, it was just on HBO. That's the only way you could watch it. So, I mean, I was definitely familiar with the theme song, of course, but wasn't really watching it every single week because I couldn't. My
Right.
mom had basic cable, not the premium channels.
Gotcha. We had HBO, and
Ooh, fancy.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Once cable got to my town, which was when, I remember it wasn't when I was an infant. It was when I was like, what, 11, maybe 12, something like that. And so then we had HBO, and Fraggle Rock was one of my favorite things about having HBO.
Yeah.
Such a great show.
But not dinosaurs. They suck.
Yeah, dinosaurs suck.
All right. Well,
What's your,
my last choice.
yeah.
Yeah. There were a number of sitcoms in the 80s that were not produced by the big networks. They were syndicated sitcoms, stuff like She's the Sheriff. She's the Sheriff is not my choice. I'm talking about another sitcom that was about a young teenage girl who finds out that her father, who she's never met, is a space alien.
Whoa.
It's called Out of This World. And what happens is the girl discovers, like, if she puts her two index fingers together, she can stop time, and wacky hijinks ensue, of course. And then at the end of each episode, like in Mork and Mindy, like there's this like square amulet thing that will open up, and there's a bright light that comes out, and then she will end up talk to her alien father, who you only hear the voice, and it was an uncredited Burt Reynolds.
Whoa.
That was the father on that show, but just mediocre at the very best. It did have some good talents, like Joe Lasky, who I'm sure you probably are not familiar with that name, but he's actually more famous. Unfortunately, he did pass away, but he was more famous for his voice acting roles. When Mel Blanc passed, he ended up taking on a lot of the Looney Tunes characters.
Oh.
So, you had that. Donna Pescow, I believe her name was, played the mother on the show. She had a somewhat memorable part in the movie Saturday Night Fever.
Mm.
So, it's not like they didn't have the talent. Of course, Burt Reynolds too, but just mediocre, bland. I mean, it wasn't even like another sitcom that I thought about adding, but one that had some charm. Do you remember Small Wonder?
No.
About it's about a family, and the father works as a guy who makes robots, and so he thought, I'm going to make a robot daughter. She's a small wonder. And just that show was also a syndicated show, I believe, but it still had a little bit more charm because of how just weird the whole premise was. Like today, I don't think you could have somebody going and stating, I want a guy to create a robot daughter, because people will just think, why is that guy trying to create a robot daughter? What's he going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, um, but out of this world, just, I mean, it shows like that should encourage anybody who is a creative who wants to, even if it's a pipe dream, get involved in the entertainment industry. It's one of those shows that should encourage you to keep on trying, because if something like that made it on the air for a couple of seasons, maybe you might get lucky and your thing could be something that will see the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just unmemorable, just mediocre and bland. I think one reason I did watch as much as I did was the young lady who played the teenager was near my age, and a little bit of a crush there, but that was about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but just awful, awful show.
Do you think that you would have had a crush on any girl that was on TV that was around your age?
Well, there was Alyssa Milano and Who's the Boss. Had a
Oh,
crush on
no.
her.
Yeah.
Debbie Gibson for a while.
Really?
Yeah. Even though like today is like, why? I'd rather have Tiffany.
Right.
You know.
Obviously.
Yeah, But yeah, like at that age, it was just like, if she has a pulse, I'm gonna be attracted.
That's what I figured. That's why I asked.
Yeah, she's a girl. I like her. Yeah, but again, this is our list, folks. This is our opinion. If you like any of these shows, great. I'm not going to say anybody who likes The Big Bang Theory is a horrible human being. I've been a little hyperbolic describing my distaste for that particular show, but we all have things we like. We all have things we don't like. And I think it is not a bad thing to talk about stuff we don't like here. It's not something we want to do on a regular basis, but I think you can have respectful critiques of stuff you don't like.
Do you feel like we did that, though?
For the most part. I mean, I of course did say that the Big Bang Theory creators should be brought to the Hague for war crimes against humanity, so maybe that was just a little much.
Yeah.
But,
maybe a little much.
Just a tad. Yeah. Not the actors. The actors are fine, but the creators behind the show.
Right.
Awful people. Anyway. Any other thoughts on bad television?
No, not really.
This is another reminder to me about this notion that everything must be preserved is not a good notion to have.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely things that do stand the test of time. Like, I hope, my grandkids, my great grandkids, or however long the generation goes down, are able to catch stuff like Three's Company or the Mary Tyler Moore Show, because I think that, is great comedy and has stood the test of time. It's something you can put on today and enjoy. And I think that's not going to change. But going through the past and going through some of these choices have kind of made it clear, I guess, that not everything needs to be preserved, and we shouldn't be so tripped up on the nostalgia bug that we try and force something to be saved when it should be sent into the dustbin of history.
Right on, man.
Yeah. All right. How about we take a quick break?
Let's take a break.
All right. We'll be right back after these messages from Palmolive.
Look at my hands.
Dishwasher safe.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Quad Pro Quo. Right now, you are probably thinking to yourself, oh great, another movie podcast. Well, dear listener, you would be right. But throw in a couple of marriages, decades-long friendships, and a shared property line, and you have just another movie podcast with a shitload of drama. Inspired by the iconic quid pro quo scene in Silence of the Lambs, Each week, one of us will pick a movie. It could be a childhood favorite, a classic film noir, an Academy Award winner, or a complete dumpster fire that brings joy to that person's heart. The selector's objective? To get us to love, or at the very least, not hate their pick. Will our marriages, our friendships, and our neighborhood survive? Find out each Thursday on Quad Pro Quo.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We've seen a couple great documentaries recently. I know one we saw the other day that is new on Max is called Louder, the soundtrack of change. And really, really enjoyed that. It is kind of a nice primer for people that want to dip their toe in more in terms of women in music.
Yeah, women rock in particular.
Yeah, they didn't stray too far away from rock and roll, even though they did feature like Rhiannon Giddens
Yeah.
in some of her music and whatnot, but still that's a relative of rock, But I thought it was definitely a great showcase of a lot of great female musical talent out there, both old and new. I think the older people get, the easier it can be to kind of dismiss new singers or new entities because they're nothing like the ones you grew up on or anything like that. But and I'm not saying you should try and force yourself to like stuff that you ultimately just don't like, but it is important to understand that a new musical artist today may be someone that you're still talking about 50, 100, 200 years from now.
That's right. And you never know who's going to be.
Yeah, and I mean there have been plenty of people that in the past that have been popular that we no longer talk about now.
Sure.
So you just don't know who's going to be the artist that is going to be able to speak to people over time. But it was if anything, and I think you will agree, we talked about it after we watched the documentary. If anything, this is kind of like a Women in Music 101.
Yeah.
Very basic information about the artists that they do talk about. But again, if you are the type of person and you can go through your musical collection and see that there's a lot of testosterone there, I think this documentary is a great way for you to be able to try and see what else is out there, because I've always tried to encourage in myself, like it's like I don't have to start watching like period pieces or like the 500th remake of Little Women to be able to enjoy women in stuff. What I can do to support would be like, I love action movies. If there's an action movie being directed by a woman, I can go to that movie and enjoy it, right? Because they're telling an action story that I like, but they may be telling it through a different lens that me as a white guy would not think of. Kind of like in Atomic Blonde.
Yeah.
So anyway, definitely.
This is why we need, I think it goes to diversity of creativity and inclusion, and how you miss out on really amazing things if you exclude people. It is that primer in women's music, really from almost a Gen X perspective, I thought. Like, it was very much about my 20s and what the perspective would have been in my 20s, right?
How many
You
of
have
you?
Melissa Etheridge, you've got Sleater Kinney kind of groups, you've got amazing singers like Nina Simone.
Yeah, I mean, they did go back into history as well. I mean, they brought up Loretta Lynn singing about the pill.
Dolly Parton.
Yeah. As well as new singers as well. And again, it's like you don't have to like the new singers, but they're making an impact, and why not try it out. What's the worst that's going to happen if you listen to a track from a new artist, a younger artist? Maybe you don't like it. That's fine, but at least you gave it a shot, right? And you're not stuck in this whole same old, jock rock, the guitar is a penis type of deal.
Nope.
But speaking of that, there was another documentary that I saw the complete version of on Paramount Plus. I believe you only saw the first episode. It's a 3-part documentary directed by one of the behind-the-scenes people from the Jackass franchise. It's called Nothing But a Good Time. And it is the history of hair metal. And I felt it was really well done. I think it showed that there is a lot of great music that came out of that era, but it also showed the drawbacks of when you have, in this case, music executives that want to capture that spirit for themselves as well. And then you have band after band after band that looks all the same, putting out the same type of music, washing over everything else to the point to where you end up becoming numb to it. And then you want something different, cue Nirvana. As far as the lifestyle that those people lived, quite intense. As we see in the news with P. Diddy, some things never change, of course, in terms of the wild debauchery. But yeah, how some of these people lived their lives in the 80s is not something I would recommend people do on any sort of a long-term basis, even short-term basis too, because it could lead to death.
Yeah.
But there was also some good music. And again, for me, I love a good music documentary, especially if it's about artists that I may not necessarily like. I still like hearing about the creative process and just the life of a musician and whatnot. I thought it was really well done.
I did too. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the first episode.
The first episode, yes.
Yeah, there were a total
I can't believe actually that there are 3 episodes.
Well, they're covering an entire decade. So the first episode is, I believe, up to like 82 or 83. The second episode is like 83, 84 to like 87 or so. And then the third episode is, essentially the start of Guns N' Roses till Nirvana. So, they're covering a lot, but again, really well done. Produced by MTV Films, so there's a lot of MTV footage in there. And they also do talk, I believe, to Ricky Rackman, who was the host of Headbangers Ball on MTV. Something I would watch whenever I could on a Saturday night.
Yeah, I remember Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
I never watched it. But I knew it was on. And it was one of the things that I was like, oh, damn it, I can't watch MTV.
They don't have Rod Stewart on the Headbangers Ball.
No, they don't. Nothing good like that.
Yes, but so take some time out of your day, folks, if you have it. Check out both of those documentaries. Any other thoughts on hair metal as a music genre?
No.
You just don't like it?
No.
Not even a couple songs?
Don't need nothing but a good time. I mean, I know a lot of it because it was popular when I was a teenager.
Yeah. Same here. But you were, being a couple years older, saw more of the hair metal stuff. Like you were probably around during the Twisted Sister era.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, like, my big intro was like Def Leppard, Guns N' Roses, and the recurring Aerosmith.
Yes.
So it was slightly different.
That was when I was older.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Friday night videos back before there was MTV, but there were videos on Friday nights
on NBC
at midnight.
Yeah. I would watch that on occasion, and I do remember, like, all I remember from that is for some reason, the Billy Ocean video for Get Out of My Dreams, Get Into My Car.
Beep, beep, ooh, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. But yeah, the 80s were unique, folks. But any other thoughts for our friends at home before we wrap things up?
No, not for me. How about you?
Nah. Let's just put an end to this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick a fork in it.
Yeah. Send it to the Hague. Anyway.
Yep.
Each Monday, we'll have something in this podcasting space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
So long.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.